Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special meeting of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors for Monday, August 8th, 2016 at 2 o'clock. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos not present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos. Campos not present. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen not present. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell not present. Supervisor Kim. Kim present. Supervisor Marr.
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener.
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee. Yee not present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any communications?
I have none to report, Madam President.
Supervisor Peskin?
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Supervisor Avalos.
Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to excuse Supervisor Avalos, seconded by Supervisor Marr. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, Supervisor Avalos is excused. Supervisor Wiener?
In terms of excusing the other supervisors?
So I know that Supervisor Cohen, Farrell, and Campos expressed a request to
Yes.
be excused.
Okay, absolutely.
You'd like to make that motion?
I would.
Okay, motioned by Supervisor Wiener, seconded by Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, they are excused, and we are now joined by Supervisor Yee. Okay, I do have one in memoriam, and I think that we may have some members of the audience who are here today. Colleagues, we don't have a traditional 2:30 roll call or commendation scheduled for this special board meeting, so I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge someone from the city family who passed away just a few days ago, Mr. Richard Dick Shaft, who passed away suddenly on Tuesday, August 2nd of this year. And if there are members of the public who are here for this in memoriam, can you please stand? Okay, it's everyone here. Thank you. Thank you. And are there members of his family who are here today as well? Thank you so much, and we'll give you a moment to say a few words. We really appreciate you all being here, so you may be seated. I'm just going to make a few remarks. As some of us know who had the privilege of knowing Dick, he was the general manager of Moscone Center and regional vice president of SMG, Moscone Center Operations, since 1981. He is survived by his wife, Marilyn, of 56 years, 2 children, Greg and Lori, and 5 grandchildren. Dick moved to San Francisco in 1981 after working at the Long Beach Convention Center as the assistant general manager. As a 45-year member of the International Association of Venue Managers, Inc., Mr. Shaft has served on numerous committees and as a member of the board of directors. He was selected as chairman of IAVM Foundation in 1988 through 1989. He served as president of the organization in 1994 through 1995 and received the association's highest honor, the Charles A. McLary Award, in 2002. In 2011, Dick was the recipient of the International Convention Center Conference Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Association of Venue Managers, Inc. He was an ex officio member of the San Francisco Travel Association, a member of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, a board member of the Fifth and Mission Garage, and a trustee of the IATSE 16 pension plan. He was always listed as one of the most influential people in the trade show industry by Trades Work Week. When he wasn't working, Dick would ride his motorcycle, cheer on the Giants and the 49ers, but loved spending time with his friends and his family, and especially his grandchildren. He will be truly missed. He has done so much for the city and county of San Francisco, and we are honored to have had such a tremendous leader in one of our most important industries, the convention and tourism industry of San Francisco, someone who has made San Francisco what it is today to visitors all over the country, and we want to thank him for his service. He will be truly missed. And with that, colleagues, without objection, I want to, before I open it up for any member of his family to comment, Supervisor Peskin, did you
Madam President, I just wanted to suggest that we make that from the entire Board of Supervisors. I knew Dick Schaff for many, many years. It was an honor to know him and work with him, and my condolences to his family and the entire city for a great loss.
Thank you. And without objection, we will do this on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors today. And without objection, if there is a member of his family or someone that he worked with, I'd welcome you an opportunity if you want to just say a few words at this time. The microphone is here.
Thank you for letting us be here and supporting him. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who came and showed up. He definitely loved his work, and I think it's because of you. He loved all the people he worked with. He enjoyed it so much. He did it till he was 77. So I just wanted to thank everybody. Everybody knows who he was, so I don't want to say too much about him. And I loved him, and we all did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, it is our honor to adjourn this meeting on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors. Thank you to his family, his friends, his coworkers, and the many people who came out to support this today. He will definitely be missed. We really, truly appreciate his service for the city. Thank you. And with that, Madam Clerk, are there any other communications?
None to report, Madam President.
Okay, can we please call the first item?
Item number 1 is the resolution to approve the 7-party supplement to the 2012 Memorandum of Understanding regarding the financial commitments to addressing the funding gap for the Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project. And I will add that the public comment requirement for this item has already been satisfied at the July 27th Budget and Finance Subcommittee.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to call on Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues, for giving us a week's continuance, which really allowed for a very productive collaboration on the city side between myself, Supervisor Tang from the board, Ed Riskin and some of his staff from the MTA, Tilly Chang and Maria Lombardo from the CTA, as well as Jillian Gillette on behalf of the mayor's office. And to that end, we have a set of protocols that are in front of you and are incorporated in the file, which, by the way, have also been reviewed by Caltrain staff, and we accommodated a couple of amendments that they suggested. And finally, the resolution itself is slightly amended on pages 4 and 5 at the first line on page 4, which indicates that the agreement will be subject to a funding protocol, and then the additional further resolved authorizing the Chief Executive and the Director of Transportation to sign the protocol and make any amendments on behalf of the city and county which do not increase our obligations or liabilities. And I look forward to San Francisco continuing to play a role as the Caltrain electrification project evolves, and making sure that we do that within our means. And I particularly want to thank Supervisor Tang for helping on this collaborative effort.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. And I do also appreciate Supervisor Peskin. I know that this was difficult for us to call a special meeting, but really at the heart of it was just to make sure that San Francisco was going to be able to handle whatever was going to come our way in the future regarding Caltrain and their projects. So one of the things that I would like to do is to also acknowledge our controller's office, because they did, and I know Supervisor Peskin wanted to acknowledge them as well, for their work in this to ensure the a very comprehensive oversight protocol. And so I wanted to kick it over to Todd Reedstrom from our controller's office to just speak to some of the amendments that we made in the oversight protocol, and those changes will be adopted as part of the file that is accompanying the resolution today.
Thank you, Todd Reedstrom, Deputy Controller, through the President. To summarize, the original protocols before you included 10 or 12 delineated items. The new one before you today has 15 separately delineated items. The 4 key additions that I'd like to draw your attention to, the first one is in item number 6. It includes the requirement of a dashboard to be created with dashboard indicators showing progress to date, baseline, and forecast outcomes, as well as any significant deviations, which was previously noted in scope, schedules, and budget. Further, in addition to that, item number 9 specifically defines significant and risk levels. In particular, it makes the requirement that the City of San Francisco and other funding partners be notified within 10 days of any significant deviations where costs would increase over $250,000. Thirdly, the addition of appropriation controls, i.e. in number 11, that funding and financing issues are subject to each respective board's authority to appropriate funding. And then finally, on item number 15 is the inclusion of the funding partners, including San Francisco, to be able to audit or review any of the project information at any time. Those are the key changes, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reedstrom. I do believe that putting all of these additions into place in our oversight protocol will ensure, hopefully in the future, that if any issues arise, that we will be privy to that information as soon as possible. Supervisor Peskin, I think, has something else to add.
Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you. I want to apologize for not acknowledging the role of the Controller's Office, and also add the role that a number of deputy city attorneys played on short notice, and finally want to acknowledge Brian Perkins here from Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office. I know that he has endeavored to help bring this thing together, and to Congresswoman Spear and the United States Congress and the Barack Obama administration, get your full funding grant agreement as quickly as possible. Godspeed.
Thank you. And so just for clarity, who will be submitting the request to amend the legislation?
The amendments, Madam President, are before you. I have circulated them. Also, I want to announce that we shared all of these changes with Supervisor Cohen's staff, who is aware of them and supportive of them, but I would like to make a motion to put the amendments that are before you, before us. I make that motion.
Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleague, can we take the amendments without objection? Without objection, the amendments pass unanimously. And on the item as amended, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 7 ayes.
The resolution as amended is adopted unanimously. Next item, Madam Clerk.
The next item is general public comment for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, to include items on the without reference calendar, items 3 and 4. Pursuant to the board's rules, direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors and nor to the audience. If you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and remove the document when you'd like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Yip.
Thank you. Good morning, Andrew Yip, Chinatown Missionary Officer. Of holiness, a man with true destiny in unity, of human nature worthy people in true unity, of self in well-nourished cultivation, of pathways for mission of holy justice. Universal heavenly phenomena would ensure a worldly peace of wellness only when mankind are in good unity without the individual differences of delineated bias. With awareness of humanity and mercy of justice, we can change the course of divine destiny for all people toward prosperity and worldly security. Two principles shall forever exist in between of heaven and earth. Outright justice shall prevail always in among everyone's heart for the worldly people. Kingsway shall take on diversified pathway in the establishment of holy religion. Heavenly virtues shall widely propagate onto cultivation of all good deeds. Holy studies shall preach universally for all worldly people. Self-nature in true success shall fully be delivered for worldly rescue. By personal nature of superior way shall work on in the new of our people. One shall maximize our bodily nature in destiny with the spiritual works on contemplation and holy mercy. Humankind with heavenly destiny shall work together in unity for giant credit in global affair. The great prosperity of holy culture shall bring heaven and man in united missionary pathway for peace and wellness, liberty and justice for all. So, holy meaning of true principles shall having of eternal glory for hundreds of generations for national integrity and security. God bless Holy Mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed. My name is Christopher Dahl. I live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 40 years from sea level. I rise to practice my ad-lib skills and remark on a number of different things. There was some comment several weeks ago about what you want to do for old people. And considering that today is my 69th birthday, and I'm shocked and amazed to have made it this far, trust me on that one. Being the oldest person in the room, lacking Harvey Rose, I guess my observations will hold. The primary thing I want is flat sidewalks. I have to watch my step very carefully. My feet are starting to get arthritic. They don't work quite as well. Another item, my comment about boilerplate restrictions on what you can use grant funds for, I did actually do a search on myself, and I think the item is 160761. That's all wrong. It's the bulb out, the money from the state of California for the SFMTA to, you wanted the city to take liability for building something. There is text in there that requires that all agencies apply, enforce all local laws, and the state of California has you as the enforcement instrument. And lastly, please do not eat in front of us. It is really, really rude, particularly when we're sitting here for 9 hours, along with you. Your task is hard, but you have a nice little room back there. Please eat back there. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy birthday. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Laura Clark of Grow SF here to talk about item 4, the proposal to once again talk about whether we're going to oppose by right, which I feel like has been fully litigated and fully discussed. And I think that the city is ready to say, at least we are conflicted about whether or not we are going to support or oppose by right, and that should be the message that is passed on. I don't really understand why this is on the agenda once again. I think it is a deliberate waste of everyone's time. We could be doing so many more effective things to truly address the housing crisis. We could be seeing bold policies proposed, such as radical things like backyard cottages. We could be doing amazing things to add to the housing stock that is so desperately needed in the city. We could be addressing things like single-family home-only detached zoning, exclusionary zoning, historically racist institutions. We could be really making progress, but instead we are spending our time deciding whether we're going to pass a motion to oppose something again for no reason. And I'm really disappointed that you guys are not taking more bold action. I'm really happy with some of the granny cottage legislation we've seen put forward. I think that there is so much more potential here, and I hope that you will take bold action soon.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Sonia from the SF Bay Area Renters Federation. I'm also here to talk about 4. I'm going to ask you to vote against this motion. Yes, similar point. We already went through it, and this is wasting everyone's time. Also, San Francisco has built some housing, but we really haven't contributed enough housing-wise to the Bay Area. And as we've sort of gone over before, the governor's by right bill would mostly apply in the areas that all San Franciscans agree definitely need to build more housing on the peninsula. I mean, the best way to get the suburbs to build housing, the peninsula to build housing, Silicon Valley, is to pass something like by right. Most San Franciscans strongly want the peninsula to build housing. So San Franciscans want this. Please vote against this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Tim Colon on behalf of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition, and wanted to express our frustration to see this motion back again, because it is to us profoundly anti-housing in the sense that perhaps if we can finally just stop producing market-rate housing, we'll get our arms around the affordability and displacement crises, which doesn't make any sense. I think it'd be good to reflect on what Governor Brown said when he put this policy forward. Number one, he said 2 really remarkable things. Number one, local jurisdictions, you don't get it. For 2-3 decades, you've been using your rulemaking authority to impede, delay, obstruct housing production. Nowhere is that more true than in San Francisco. If it weren't, San Francisco Housing Action Coalition wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have a job. He's saying that local jurisdictions have got to stop obstructing housing, and that's one of his intents in doing this. The second one is equally remarkable. He said, under no realistic economic scenario is it possible for the state of California to subsidize its way out of this problem. I think if I remember what he said that I read in the newspaper, he said, the affordable housing you're asking, it delivers too little and it costs too much. And there's no evidence that he's going to change dramatically and open the floodgates to start funding production of subsidized housing. We're left to our own devices. It doesn't make any sense to oppose this by right measure and at the same time try and impede the production of housing in San Francisco. We need a lot more of it, and would urge you to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Supervisors, Michael Terrio, San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council. While I will on many occasions agree with the prior 3 speakers on this, I will disagree. This is not an anti-housing measure. Housing is inevitably a more complex question than the simple production of physical buildings, and it involves serving the needs of community in a variety of ways, among them serving the needs of labor. I'm not averse to pointing that out. But also serving the needs of low-income communities, making sure that there is no displacement, and making sure that there is no unwarranted and unanswered destruction of rent-controlled housing. And the current measure that the governor is pushing does not do any of those things. It needs to be called to account. We need to remind our legislators at the state that they need to call the governor to account. I absolutely respect and appreciate the mayor's approach in taking a positive stance toward the legislation. I'm not convinced that that works. With the state building trades, we are asking you to oppose the legislation and until it is amended to the point where it actually does what it's supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Milo with Grow SF, and I would like you to deny this agenda item. I also think it's a waste of time. I think lots of the things have been settled. the governor's bill is a good idea. One of the stipulations in the request is to ask the governor to preserve demolition controls, but the governor already has those preserved. So that's kind of an example of how we're kind of redundantly doing things again, unnecessarily. So yeah, support the government's bill. The peninsula really needs this housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I was just asking one of the officers if it would be possible if you guys could provide bottled water instead of us. You know, sometimes they get pretty thirsty, and that would be a nice amenity if you'd be so kind. Now, I promised that I was going to do a commercial, I believe, here for Jeb and the Bush Crime Family. That's the title of the book by Roger Stone and St. John Hunt. But believe it or not, I haven't read the book yet, so I can't comment on it. It came in the mail, and then I went to the computer and found out we were going to have this special meeting and drove down here. And so I haven't been able to prepare a speech on that. But you know what? At the name of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Kim, David. It's only a matter of time. Jehovah has spoken in Isaiah 45. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. And Paul applied that to Philippians 2, to Jesus. Jesus is Jehovah. It's a great mystery. It's a great mystery. But confess him. You're going to confess him. Jesus is going to say to everyone who hates him, come here, get down on your knees and acknowledge to everybody who I am. And everybody will say, Jesus is Lord. There was a parable in the Gospel of Luke, how he said, but those that would not have me reign over them, bring them hither and slay them before me. The meek and lowly Lamb of God is going to become the Lion of the tribe of Judah on the last day. We are very near the end. Judgment day is coming. Before Christ died, he said, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and everything written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man will be accomplished. Notice he didn't say, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and everything spoken by the prophets will be fulfilled, but everything that was written by the prophets will be fulfilled. Why? Because they were all dead guys, but they had their books. Moses, the 5 books of Moses, Isaiah, Daniel.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti. Building houses that 88% of the people in San Francisco can't afford is not a dynamic housing project. We need to realign our whole directions instead of allowing real estate developers to make a whole lot of money. Healthy neighborhoods, I think, is what we're after. Part of our society, we're lucky we have GEMS. Michael Krasny, a couple of months ago, Forum, did a show on narcissism. If you need any more identity about Donald Trump, you don't really do. Just listen to that show if you can. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, if you see her, ask her about what happened in 2009 with Honduras when she was, and America was the only country that recognized the coup d'etat. South America, Central America, Latin America, nobody else did. And now we have Honduran mothers with their children at our refugees at our gates. I'd like for her to release her transcripts to Wall Street. And there's a few things more, but we're running out of time. I'm wearing a nice new green shirt. What do you think Julie Stein would think of that? I mentioned before about police not wearing their gun belts. I think it's the time. I hope some of you get to travel someplace in a country that has them, or at least that are not wearing them. We can do a whole lot better. I think everybody, the police and the society, everybody would be happier. I'm recommending for the first time that we find some safe buildings so drug addicts can shoot up under San Francisco supervised supervision. It's got to be better as long as they do their drugs on site and prevent the litter on the streets happening now. Enjoy your vacations.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And if there are any further speakers, please line up to the left. Please make your comments, sir.
Okay, I request your open patience for a few brief minutes of legislative history to place the present matter within proper economic context. The condominium moratorium has sidelined small property owners, reduced competition, withheld potential income, and constricted housing supply, which provides an economic boon favorable towards recent corporate constructed dwellings of luxury and scale. Affordability set-asides have raised the cost of abutting and adjoining units beyond the reach of most employed people who now find themselves unable to make ends meet. Owing to bureaucratic mismanagement and malregulation of the marketplace, the Bay Area is still short some 68,000 housing units. Rent control, 75 amendments, and fiscal inflation have combined to place hardworking tenants in a comparable position to that of the frog boiled by water in a pot over time and by a comfortable elevation of degree. Heaping on rent caps would contribute towards economic suffocation. A freeze and the economy will catch cold. Political intervention has added premium to the cost of raw land, increased the price for present owners, prospective contractors, and potential tenants, and the public in general. All those who lack designated protective status have been de facto legislated to buy high or not at all. It is a social policy which soothes injury with salt. Future boards may avoid inheriting such institutional disorder. San Francisco can and should adopt and embrace the governor's buy right legislation and cultivate the spirit of free initiative, encouraging local economy, contributing to blue-collar industry, consistent with our shared values regarding socioeconomic diversity. Opportunity is knocking at the door. You can open it or approve the risk of turning common sense away an orphan.
Madam President, seeing no other speakers lining up, that concludes the introduction. That concludes public comment.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide any public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Mr. Gilberti, I know you're kidding. All right. With that, Madam Clerk, let's go to the items for adoption without committee reference. And can you please call item number 3?
Item 3 is a motion to approve a final map 8253 located at 2101 and 2155 Webster Street.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the motion is approved unanimously. Please call item number 4.
Item 4 is a motion to urge the San Francisco Legislative Delegation to amend or oppose the by right housing approvals proposed trailer bill in recognition of San Francisco's local planning tools and significant contributions to regional housing development, and to order the clerk of the board to transmit the urgent policy position regarding the by right housing approval proposed trailer bill to all 120 members of the state legislature.
President Breed.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'd like to propose a motion, and I just want to I would like to propose an amendment, and I just want to take this opportunity to explain why. My concern is not necessarily the substance of the motion. My concern is that it is a motion. There is, in my view, no legal basis for the Board of Supervisors to enact a substantive policy position by motion under Section 2.105 of the City Charter, which says that the Board of Supervisors shall act only by written ordinance or resolution, except that it may act by motion on matters over which the Board of Supervisors has exclusive jurisdiction. All legislative acts shall be by ordinance. And we do not have exclusive jurisdiction over a housing proposal being negotiated in Sacramento or over the position San Francisco takes on that proposal. Exclusive jurisdiction refers to parliamentarian matters, like when we will meet or whether we will sit as a committee of the whole. That is why the board rule 5.13 narrowly defines the actions we take by motion, which I won't go over the details of that. But again, my concern is not necessarily about the substance of the motion, but as board president, I have an obligation to protect the rules of the game, the boundaries under which our legislature functions. And I don't want to establish the precedent that the board can take substantive policy positions by motions, and motions have not recently been subject to single supervisorial privilege to send an item to committee, and that means we could theoretically start having motions on important policy topics show up on the adoption without reference agenda, and if a simple majority supports them, the motion would never go to committee, never be subject to specific public comment periods, and never face involvement from the city's executive branch. And we want to presumably set policy absent. We don't want to set policy absent a fair public engagement process or notwithstanding our city charter. So we simply don't have the legal authority, and we shouldn't do anything to suggest that we think we do. And for that reason, colleagues, I'm asking for a simple amendment at the top of this motion, which will make that clear. And that amendment has been passed out to some of you already. It just says, whereas the San Francisco Board of Supervisors cannot, under the city charter or the board's own rules of order, establish substantive policy positions by motion. However, this motion simply reiterates a policy position previously adopted by the board in Resolution 160660, and then it goes into the rest of the resolution. The city attorney supports this. Supervisor Peskin supports this amendment. And so with that, I would move to approve this particular amendment into the record.
President Breed has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Peskin. If there's no discussion on the amendment itself as opposed to the motion, can we take that motion to amend without objection? Without objection, the motion to amend is adopted unanimously.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin.
Madam President, colleagues, this item has been the subject of extensive discussions in committee and at the full board. Time is of the essence as this matter is being deliberated in Sacramento in the days ahead. I want to again acknowledge the state senator from San Francisco, Mark Leno, for his work on this. I know that there are delegations from across the state that will be visiting with legislators in Sacramento tomorrow. Madam Clerk, I am hopeful that should this motion pass today, that you and your hardworking staff will be able to get that out to our legislators as quickly as possible. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge the obvious, which is this did pass by a majority vote of this body. It is very rare, but the mayor chose to veto that resolution. And I think that what Mr. Terrio said is actually quite right, which is that in some form, this is a fight over tone. The mayor's May 13th letter relative to substance is not that different than the substance of this resolution or of this motion, previously a resolution. And what I think Mr. Terrio said that we should all take heed of is that the supportive requests of the mayor as well as Mayor Garcetti have thus far fallen on deaf ears at the governor's office relative to making amendments that would acknowledge that San Francisco has actually been a leader in affordable housing development and would like this bill to be amended so that we can continue to use the tools in our toolbox that we have pioneered. And so I think it is time for this motion, once a resolution to pass, to say to the state legislature, We oppose Trailer Bill 707 unless these amendments are made. And by the way, these amendments now have widespread support from organizations all over the state of California. Maybe some of them are not from SF BARF or SF GROW, but so be it. And with that, Madam Clerk, Madam President, I am prepared to vote on this again.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have to say, this whole process I find to be irregular and really problematic. As an initial matter, I did listen to President Breed's comments, and frankly, I think President Breed's comments were right on point in terms of why we should not be doing this. To set a precedent, as we are doing today, even with the amendment, that you can introduce a resolution at the Board of Supervisors, you can have that resolution fail, whether it's at the board level or if it's because the mayor vetoes it, but have your resolution go through the normal process and fail, and then you can turn around and say, well, I don't like that result, so I'm just going to introduce it as a motion. And of course, the difference being that the mayor cannot veto a motion. A motion is effectively a procedural vote within the Board of Supervisors. And the reason why we have motions and why the mayor doesn't play a role in signing or vetoing motions is because a motion is supposed to be about those of us within the Board of Supervisors setting our own procedural rules. And motions can be about setting hearings or other procedural matters. That is really the purpose of motions, and it's why the mayor plays no role, because it's not his province to be meddling within the internal procedural operations of the Board of Supervisors. Our motions have never been intended to set substantive policy for the city. That's never been what they're about. But that is exactly what this motion is purporting to do. This motion is sour grapes. This motion is, we didn't get what we wanted through the normal process because the mayor vetoed it. So as a result, we're going to do an irregular motion that the mayor can't touch. And then I appreciate Supervisor Peskin's transparency in that what he intends to do is then to use this to somehow falsely imply to the legislature that this is somehow the position of the city of San Francisco. And that it's not. We set policy in terms of lobbying the legislature by way of resolution of this board, and the mayor either signs it or lets it become the official policy without signing it, or if the board doesn't act, then the mayor can lobby. That's how it works. And yet this would create significant confusion. And if I were a member of the legislature from some other part of the state, and all of a sudden someone were to come in and say, well, the board passed this, the mayor vetoed it, then the board passed a motion, and the mayor is not allowed to either sign or veto it. And so what is the position of the city? This is going to create confusion, and that's why we have a distinction between resolutions and motions. But putting all that aside, the board is going to act the way it's going to act today in terms of our votes, and then we'll proceed from there. I'll be voting against this, not simply because of the procedural mechanism, but on the merits, for the same reason that I voted against Supervisor Peskin's previous iteration of this when it used to be a resolution. And colleagues, you'll recall I offered an alternative resolution that basically said there are issues with what the governor is proposing around demolitions and a few other areas, and we should work collaboratively with the governor to fix the by right legislation so that it works, and then we should not just simply oppose. And so my position continues to be the same. We should be working with the governor to improve his legislation to fix the defects rather than opposing it. And I also just need to repeat what I said during the last debate. San Francisco is not doing well when it comes to housing. as reflected in the average rent of $3,500 a month, as reflected in the evictions and displacement that we're seeing, as reflected in the number of people who are still living with their ex, because even though they've been broken up for 2 years, neither of them can afford to move out and find alternative housing. We have a real crisis on our hands here in San Francisco, and I don't think we should be patting ourselves on the back. We have a lot of work to do. Yes, subsidized below market rate housing is incredibly important, and I think we unanimously support that at the Board of Supervisors, and we want more below market rate housing. But that will not solve our housing crisis on its own. We also need more housing overall. That's what the governor's plan is designed to do. It is not a perfect plan. It needs amendments, and we should work with the governor collaboratively to get those amendments done. This is not the right approach, in my opinion, and so I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't want to belabor this, although I do want to, as a matter of collegiality and civility, take exception to claims of sour grapes. The Board of Supervisors is the policy body of San Francisco. The mayor has the ability to express himself on behalf of the executive branch, and indeed did so by letter in May. The mayor has the prerogative, albeit it has not been used in modern times, to veto a policy resolution of the policy body. The policy body may, in its sole and absolute discretion, pass a motion to express itself as the policy body. It is legal. I admit it is not oft done, but it has been really rather remarkable that the chief executive vetoed this, and this is the only way to timely express the majority opinion of this body to the state legislature. And the policy, I think we have discussed ad nauseum. And Madam President, if you are willing, why don't we call the roll?
Supervisor Supervisor Wiener.
You know, we're easily confusable, Madam President. I have Madam President, if I may, through the chair to the city attorney, just a couple of questions. So if this motion passes today, what will the position of the city of San Francisco be vis-a-vis this bill in Sacramento?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, as you mentioned, Supervisor Wiener, and as the President mentioned, the city adopts formal policy positions on state legislation through resolution or could through ordinance, duly enacted by the board and either signed or returned unsigned by the mayor, or overridden, or have a veto overridden. The board has not adopted a resolution that has gone into effect setting a policy on this particular bill. So the city has no formal policy position on this bill, and the motion cannot set the city's formal policy position on this bill. The mayor, under the charter, has the authority to coordinate intergovernmental affairs, and so the mayor can direct the lobbyists to take positions regarding amendments or regarding the bill.
And so what would be an appropriate use of this motion if it passes, again, in Sacramento, in terms of advocacy around this bill?
I can't speak to what would be appropriate. The mayor can use it as he wishes in terms of lobbying on behalf of the city in his discretion.
So if this passes today, we could have the mayor lobbying in favor of the bill with amendments, and we could have others going and saying, look, I have a motion from the Board of Supervisors opposing the bill.
Others, meaning members of the public who take this motion, which will be a public document, and say, here's the position that a majority of the Board of Supervisors has taken?
Or members of the Board of Supervisors. I think Supervisor Peskin asked the President to consider sending a letter quickly with the motion, if it passes, saying the Board of Supervisors passed this motion.
No, that's what the motion calls
Supervisor Peskin?
Okay, correct. That's correct. That's what the motion asks, that the motion, if passed, be transmitted to all 120 members of the legislature. So if we have a situation where we have the mayor of San Francisco lobbying on behalf of the city under the charter in favor of the bill with amendments, and then we have the Board of Supervisors transmitting a motion opposing the bill to the legislature, you could have that kind of conflict.
That's right. Beyond the clerk forwarding the motion that was adopted by the board, individual supervisors in their individual capacity as residents of the state can lobby the legislature, but the board, including the clerk's letter, cannot take a position on behalf of the city and county.
So in terms of the direction in this motion, I'll pull it up here. It says, further resolved that the Board of Supervisors directs the clerk to transmit this motion to all 120 members. When you have the motion itself says we oppose, and so then the clerk would be directed to transmit that to all 120 members on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, not as a resident of the state. How that seems a little odd, given that we have the mayor who has the charter power to lobby absent legislation or resolution that goes into effect, and then you have the Board of Supervisors saying, wait, we actually oppose this.
Yes, the mayor has the power to coordinate all the intergovernmental affairs. For many years, the board, in its resolutions, taking positions on behalf of the city, has directed the clerk to forward copies of those resolutions to the legislature or to certain members of the legislature, even though the mayor generally has the power to coordinate intergovernmental affairs. We have advised that that the clerk is not prohibited from forwarding a document adopted by the board to the legislature, but that is essentially the extent of the clerk and board's direct involvement in legislative affairs. To your knowledge, and I know you haven't held this role forever, but are you aware of any other situation where the board has directed that a motion not subject to any review by the mayor under our balance of powers, that be transmitted to the state legislature? And that gets into I think the real challenges that President Breed identified in terms of setting a precedent that you can short-circuit the normal process of going to committee, of having the mayor sign or veto, and just do a motion and appear to be taking a position, even though we're not allowed to take a position via motion. I'm not aware of this having happened before.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, Madam Clerk, seeing no other names on the roster, on the item as amended, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Wiener?
No.
Wiener, no. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 5 ayes and 2 noes with Supervisors Tang and Wiener in the dissent.
The motion as amended is approved.
Madam President.
Point of order.
Madam President,
yes, Clerk.
Yes, the item at least has to have 6 votes. The item only received 5 votes.
Not by motion. Majority of those present and voting.
Mr. Gibner, can you please give us the clarity?
Sure. Under the charter, the board must act by majority of all its members. The board rules provide that on parliamentary matters, the board may act by a majority of those present. So, for instance, 2 weeks ago, the board continued an item and amended an item by a majority of those present, but fewer than 6. But to actually act on an ordinance, resolution, or motion and approve it requires 6 votes of the board.
So basically, this fails if it doesn't receive 6.
Correct.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the motion fails. Madam Clerk, can you please read the in memoriams?
Madam President, I believe the individual's name is Richard Dick Shaft.
Yes.
Okay, this meeting will be adjourned in memory of Mr. Richard Dick Shaft.
Okay, colleagues, this brings us to the end of our agenda. Madam Clerk, is there any further business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Okay, we are adjourned.